So I want to talk about this idea of linguistic abstractions, the concept within, in our case, the English language, where certain terms are used to categorize things that otherwise can't be quantified, like happiness, love. Sometimes certain colors you see that we don't have a name for, so we just categorize it into a name that we already have. And there are three linguistic abstractions that, to me, resonated because they all relate to each other, and that is luck, presence, or being present, and failure. I'm going to start with luck. So recently, I've been dabbling in the world of entrepreneurship, trying out different projects and freelancing things that I've been wanting to try for a while. And there's a commonality among performance psychologists and successful entrepreneurs where they talk about the idea of, doing what you can with what you have rather than worrying about the things you don't have control over, and gaining skill sets that you can use to serve other people and ultimately grow into a creation or an art of some form. But there's always a few out there who kind of controversially talk about the idea that what entrepreneurs don't want to talk about is luck, because of the fact that you don't really have control over something like that. From a business perspective, you can't monetize luck. You can always monetize a skill set. You can sell someone on teaching them a skill set, but you can't teach somebody luck. And from the other perspective, from the perspective of the learner or the beginner, you don't like the idea that a lot of what you're doing is relegated to something you don't have control over. But what exactly is luck? It's basically just being at the right place at the right time. And when you think of it that way, and you start to think of it as the chance that you'll be somewhere at the right time, you start to see it as maybe something more quantifiable, like odds. Now, if you look at it from the perspective of odds, you can increase or decrease your odds or your chances of something by, in this case, being at more places more of the time. And now you can't be everywhere all the time, but you can increase your chances or your odds by just placing yourself in certain places at certain times and doing it more often than others. So when you start to look at it in a way that is quantifiable, you start to understand that terms like creating your own luck is not just some philosophical motivational thing, but it's actually something you can actually do. You can increase your chances of doing something or being somewhere or whatever it might be. Now that brings me to the other abstraction, and that is presence or being present, which links to the idea of clearing your past. Now, Chip Wilson talks about this in his interview with Tim Ferriss, Chip Wilson being the guy who created Lululemon. And he talks about this idea that when you're trying to sell somebody on something, you can't shove it down their throat when they're preoccupied with their significant other or having to go to the bathroom or something like that. The idea being that you need to clear certain things in your quote-unquote past, or clear things that are in the way, whether it be cognitively or otherwise, in order to be present. And this is something that I found interesting in my recent projects, because while I'm not clearing my past for the sake of someone else to give attention to them, clearing my past within myself might actually be something I needed to focus on. And I've been doing that in, again, a quantifiable manner of checklists. And I've mentioned checklists before, but this idea that there are all these different projects I want to delve into, and I have these ideas, and then I worry about executing them in a way that's perfect, or in a way that's satisfactory to me before I actually put them out there. And that, combined with the number of things I've wanted to execute on, I'll start one thing and get my attention pulled in another direction, and then I end up spending 2 hours trying to decompress from the exhaustion of looking in all these different directions, and then the day is gone. But then by putting things into a checklist, not only a checklist, but also making items on the checklist that are small and that are achievable within a short period of time so that I can check them off and move on to the next thing, has been a way to clear my past, has been a way to be present. Even the idea of writing it down in a list allows you to offload that from your mind. And those two lead me to the third abstraction, which is failure. And it comes down to the cliche of being comfortable with failure, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and all that stuff. And you hear that all the time for these particular reasons. That what I've realized in trying to be present is executing on actions. And executing on actions more of the time leads you to increasing your quote-unquote luck. But you can't execute on anything if you continue to be worried about how the outcome might be. And there are certain times where you want the outcome to be acceptable at the very least, if not exceptional. But the pontification and the mental mastication of trying to get to that point where something is perfect is essentially futile. You need to be able to clear the past in order to execute. And that's where getting comfortable with failure actually comes in, because it's not actually teaching yourself to be comfortable with failing. It's actually pushing yourself to fail. Picking something that you know you'll actually fail at, actually giving yourself the task of creating something that's terrible, of creating art that's terrible, of taking photos that are bad, of creating a business idea that's going to flop. Because once you get comfortable, or once you sort of go head first into something that you know may potentially fail, a feeling that you know sucks, what it does is, in your mind, it's like, well, what if it doesn't work? But when you actually go for it and execute, then it becomes a question of what if it does? And you can't answer that question until you actually execute. And so getting comfortable with the idea of something potentially failing not only gets you to the point where you can execute, but that gives you that golden feeling, that unlock of when certain people say that I thrive on failure. I go towards the pain. I look forward to losing. This is what they mean. It's because when you have that fear of failure, when you're going towards the hard stuff, you start to realize that that feeling of the failure or the fear is actually a signal that there's something good, that there's something on the other side of that. And when you learn to dance with that failure, and you learn to realize that the failure is a feeling, or the fear of it is a feeling, and the failure might come, but it also might not come. In fact, the success might come. You start to get not just comfortable with the failure, but you start to actually gravitate towards it. You start to actually develop a little bit of a radar for when that feeling comes. You perk up and you start moving towards that.